Did you ever play a sequel to a game and wonder what the fuck happened? Well, that's what this series is about, as it focuses on sequels to overall good games that went awry in one form or another. Now, the opinions expressed in these videos aren't necessarily my true feelings about the game, as they're just heavily biased opinions focusing on the flaws that are present in these sequels. With that being said, let's get started. The Devil May Cry series got its start in 2001, and it was originally planned to be Resident Evil 4. However, the game was such a huge divergence from the Resident Evil franchise that it was spun off into its own series. The first Devil May Cry released with great success and was given a sequel in 2003 and a prequel in 2005. Following the release of the PlayStation 3, the developers of Devil May Cry 4 decided to introduce a new character for players who were not initiated with the Devil May Cry series, and created Nero. Now, by the looks of him, you'd probably assume that Nero was basically a younger Dante, but let me assure you, that's not the case. I mean, just look, he's got this blue coat and the devil arm. See, he's totally not like Dante at all. Okay, maybe he does look incredibly similar to Dante, but at least his personality is different. Just look at the way he mocks the other demons. Dante never does that. Oh wait, that's kinda Dante's whole gimmick, isn't it? Well shit, it looks like they just remade Dante with the devil arm. Now I know some of you were saying, that's not true, Nero is different than Dante. And you know what, you're right. He is, considering that Nero fucking sucks, where Dante doesn't. Unlike Dante, Nero doesn't unlock any new weapons, and barely unlocks any useful abilities besides like 3 combos and the ability to double jump. And most of the abilities he does unlock can't even be used in combat. For instance, after you beat the Chapter 7 boss, you'll get this red fruit, which lets you wither demonic trees in the forest. So a reward for defeating a boss is an item that kills plants that were blocking your path in this one level. I mean, really? Why is this item in the game? Its only purpose is to kill off these trees in one level. Why wouldn't the designers try to incorporate this item into the game in some other way to make it more useful? And this problem isn't even limited to this item, as 5 out of the 7 key items you find are only useful in a few non-combat situations. And that right there is the biggest problem with Nero. Combat with him is just so goddamn boring. In other Devil May Cry games, you'd get different weapons, and you could purchase different attack combos, and by the end of the game, overall you'd feel stronger than you were at the beginning. But for Nero, even though there are some combos you can buy, ultimately he feels as strong in the beginning of the game as he is in the end, because his weapons are so weak. His gun, the Blue Rose, is similar to Ebony and Ivory in that it fires quick shots and can only be upgraded to fire charge shots. I don't know about anyone else, but when playing with Dante, once I got better ranged weapons, I tended to use those, instead of Ebony and Ivory, because they're so weak. Unfortunately, Nero doesn't have that luxury, and you're stuck with this gun the whole game. As for a sword, the Red Queen, it's kinda like Dante's Rebellion. However, the Red Queen has one distinction over the Rebellion, in that it can be charged to do more damage. Of course, the concept of charging up a sword after every strike in order to do more damage in a game like Devil May Cry might be one of the dumbest game mechanics in history. Initially, charging the sword requires you to stop fighting and stand around holding the L2 button to charge the sword. However, later you can purchase an ability where if you hit the L2 after an attack, your sword will be charged up. But again, why the fuck would I want to do that? Finally, Nero has his Devil Arm, which allows him to grab and throw enemies. The Devil Arm is actually pretty useful and cool, but was it necessary to create a whole new character just to create the Devil Arm mechanic? I don't think so. I mean, they could have easily given Dante some chain-like weapon or ability that would allow him to pull enemies to him or pull himself towards enemies. That would have accomplished the same thing the Devil Arm did. Fortunately, about halfway through the game, Nero gets captured and you finally get to play as Dante. And holy shit, let me tell you, after playing with Dante, you really realize how bad they fucked up on Nero. Like in Devil May Cry 3, Dante has access to the style system, but this time you can switch on the go instead of having to choose one style before a mission and sticking with it. For those who don't know what the style system is, the style system lets you perform different actions with the circle button depending on which style you choose, and adds more depth to the combat system. Also, much like the other Devil May Cry games, after beating a boss, Dante unlocks new weapons, which can be switched to on the fly. This way you can string together more combos by switching and using different weapons. These new weapons also have different combos that can be unlocked in the shop. What I hate most about Dante though is that he's in the game. Now I know what you're thinking, didn't you just say Dante was way better than Nero? And yes, I did, but that's the problem right there. The fact that Dante not only shows up in fewer levels than Nero, but is also more fun to play with and has access to more weapons than Nero, is absolutely retarded. Why would you create and introduce a character that is so much worse than your original main character and force you to play with them for the majority of the game, only to reintroduce your original character and have them play infinitely better? And the best part about all this is that after you've played as Dante for 7 levels, and the last 2 you're forced to play as Nero again, with no new upgrades or powers than before. Besides the mediocre gameplay, the settings in the game are also pretty lackluster. I wouldn't exactly call the set pieces in the other Devil May Cry games exciting or varied, since most of the other games take place in 1 or 2 settings for the whole game, but Devil May Cry 4 really ramps up the repetitiveness. There is so much backtracking in this game that half the game is backtracking. You basically have to make your way through the whole game as Nero, and then when Nero gets captured, you have to make your way back to the start as Dante, going through the same environments and even fighting the same bosses. It also doesn't help that the puzzles are god-awful. The puzzles in the Devil May Cry series have never really been the best, but seeing as how I don't really remember any of the puzzles from the other games, I really can't say with any authority whether or not that statement is true. That being said, the puzzles in Devil May Cry 4 are so fucking bad that they're more like tests of endurance rather than puzzles. For some reason, in most of them, it's usually not enough that you fail the puzzle, but every time you fuck up, you're forced to fight a group of enemies, which can quickly become tedious. For example, in Mission 3, there's a part called the Torture Room, where you have to make your way across several platforms on the ceiling in order to get to the next area. It sounds simple enough, and it should have been, except for some reason I could not make it over one gap, because I kept hitting the spikes on the ceiling, which sent me back down to the basement where I had to fight a group of enemies before I could proceed. All I want to know is why. Why the fuck would they design it this way? This is the 3rd fucking mission in the game, and it took me 10 fucking tries and half an hour to get by this. And why? Because I didn't hit the stupid button fast enough? And because of that, every time I failed, I had to fight a group of 7 guys all over again? Fuck you! There's also this stupid board game puzzle where you have to hit this die with your sword in order to advance through the area, where different colored spots do different things. The great thing about this is that it's next to impossible to hit the number you want on the die, so you pretty much have to randomly hit it and pray that it doesn't land on a red spot, otherwise you'll have to fight a group of enemies. So finally, you make it to the second last level in the game and... No, not this fucking puzzle again! Ah, fuck me, if this stupid puzzle wasn't bad enough the first time, now I have to go through several of these. And because it's in the circle, if you don't roll the exact number, you have to go around the circle all over again. But the best fucking part about this is that after you make it to the goal, you get to fight one of the bosses again, for the 3rd fucking time. Speaking of bosses, I hope you like fighting bosses, because if you don't, you're shut out of luck. Because pretty much every stage in this game has a boss fight at the end of it. Normally I wouldn't have an issue with this, but there are only 8 different bosses in the game, and you have to fight several of them on multiple occasions, and it's the exact same boss fight each time. The game also expects you to use the Devil Arm during boss battles, but it doesn't tell you when you're supposed to use it. Several times I tried to use the Devil Arm in parts where I thought it was supposed to work, only for it to fail, and other times it seemed to work just fine. A simple solution to this would have been to make your arm glow when you're able to use it against the boss. I mean, there is an item that makes your arm glow when you're near a secret, so why couldn't it have been used to show you when you could use the Devil Arm on the boss? So at the end of the game, you kill the final boss and now you have to stop the stone statue, but what do? I try jumping and he hits me. I try using the Devil Arm and he hits me. What the fuck are you supposed to do? Well, apparently you have to dodge his right fist, hit it, then dodge his left one and hit that, and finally use the Devil Arm in his head. But there's no fucking indication that that's what you're supposed to do. On top of that, this whole scene is fucking pointless. They could have just put this in a cutscene, so why the fuck did I have to do this then? This issue of not giving players a good enough indication of what to do also occurs during the main game. Usually it's not that difficult to figure out what corridors you need to walk down, but it can be easy to get disoriented, especially when you gain a new ability and you have to remember how to get back to the part you were stuck on, so you can use your new ability. In these cases, you'll usually end up running all over the place since the set pieces just kind of blend in together. And don't bother using the map, because although the map shows you where you just were, it doesn't show you where you need to go. And besides, most of the time the map is just a jumbled mess of rectangles. And while you run around looking for your objective, be prepared to run into a ton of annoying enemies. Every time, and I mean every single fucking time, you encounter a group of enemies, you have to see the exits being blocked off, and then the same metal song for every enemy encounter pops up. The battles themselves are then repetitive as you just pull off the same 3 combos over and over to kill the enemies. And just when you think you've killed every enemy on the screen, more pop up and you have to fight another wave of the same enemies you just fought. At least when you're playing with Dante, you have more variation in your combat choices, so the game isn't so repetitive. But considering you play most of the game as Nero, this shit gets old real quick. In a lot of instances, when playing as Nero, it was a real struggle fighting enemies later on in the game, as well as some of the bosses, who would just absolutely wreck me. For example, I fought this frog thing like 4 times before I was able to beat him, because none of my moves did any substantial damage to him, and he kept eating me. So after struggling to beat this boss, I finally do it. But wait, what's this? Enemy handicap? What the fuck does that mean? Well, a quick search reveals that if you die too many times during a boss fight, then the difficulty is automatically turned down, thus the enemy handicap. So the feeling of satisfaction you just had for beating that boss is completely null unless you don't mind or care that the difficulty was lowered. I mean, at least give me the option whether or not I want the enemy handicap. Don't just put it on without telling me. What if you played Super Mario Galaxy and the Cosmic Guide automatically went into effect when you died too many times? Wouldn't you be a little pissed when you reached the end and found out that you really didn't deserve that victory? The same principle applies here. Now, I'm usually the type of person who finds every health upgrade and beats every side mission in the game, but I just couldn't do it in this game. The side missions were so ridiculously retarded that I soon gave up even bothering to attempt them. I mean, look how ridiculous this is. How am I supposed to protect this scarecrow guy against all these things? Or dodge his lasers without slowing down time? And don't even get me started on this god-awful gyro challenge. The worst part is that some of these challenges can only be completed by Dante or Nero. Of course, you won't know who can complete which mission until you enter the room and subsequently get your ass kicked. In conclusion, fuck this game.